Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute biggest architectural mysteries in human history. I want you to just picture this for a second. Imagine you're standing out in the English countryside. There's this golden sunrise burning right through the early morning fog, and it's illuminating these massive, completely silent stones that have just been standing there in a perfect circle for literally thousands of years. It's a pretty wild image, right? Well, today, we're cutting through all the myths. We're looking strictly at the hard, mainstream archaeological evidence to reconstruct the true story of this ancient marvel. We're going to paint a really vivid picture of prehistoric Britain, and honestly, the pure genius of the people who lived there. Okay, let's dive into this. Who actually built Stonehenge over 4,000 years ago? And, maybe even more baffling, why on earth did they go to the unimaginable effort of moving these enormous stones across hundreds of kilometers? We aren't just talking about tossing a few rocks into the back of a cart here. We are talking about a mind-boggling logistical mega-project, all done by people who are working with tools of bone, stone, and wood. No heavy machinery. The sheer scale of ambition is just staggering. So to really understand the why, we first have to unpack the who and the how. Think about this. Stonehenge is over 4,000 years old. Just let that sink in for a sec. This structure predates so much of recorded history. It has just stood there, silently, watching countless empires rise and fall. So it's totally unsurprising that it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized all over the globe for its absolutely unparalleled cultural importance. It literally gives us a window directly into the Neolithic mind. But to really grasp what this monument actually means, we've got to step way back in time. We need to get away from the modern highways and tourist centers and look closely at the actual builders of this masterpiece.
So the people living in prehistoric Britain during the Neolithic period, they were right in the middle of a monumental shift in human history, the transition to early farming. And this new agricultural bedrock, it was a total game changer. It allowed for complex, developing communities to actually settle down and thrive. These people had a rich daily life in a surprisingly highly organized society. Because let's be real, you don't just build Stonehenge without a massive, highly coordinated community effort. You need an agricultural surplus just to feed all those workers. You need sophisticated leadership. And you absolutely need a powerful shared vision. Now, a really common misconception is that Stonehenge was just thrown up in a single, massive building event, like one and done. But actually, no. This was a multi-generational construction project that spanned centuries. In the very first century of its life, we only see the first earthworks, basically just circular ditches and banks. It actually wasn't until around the 5th century of its development that we start seeing the early stone placements. And get this, it took until the 10th century of its active use for those monumental stone phases to happen. The iconic, towering silhouettes we all recognize today. This wasn't just a static building, it was a living, evolving project that held immense significance for generation after generation of these early farmers. Now, what's really interesting about this is the incredible contrast between the materials they actually chose to use. On one hand, you have the giant sarsen stones, those massive, towering pillars, and their origins were relatively local. But then you have the smaller blue stones, and man, that is where the mystery really deepens. Even though they're smaller, they still weigh tons, and they were brought in from vastly different geographic origins, literally hundreds of kilometers away. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why bypass perfectly good local stone just to drag these specific rocks across vast, treacherous distances? Well, it tells us that the material itself, or maybe exactly where it came from, must have held some profound, deep meaning to those Neolithic builders. Which naturally brings us to the obvious logistical nightmare here, the transportation. Moving these giants required a mix of serious brute force and incredible ingenuity. We're talking wooden rollers, heavy sledges, and really intricate water transport. It might sound straightforward on paper, but just try to imagine the sheer physical effort required. Mainstream experimental archaeology has actually stepped up to test these exact methods. And by recreating those heavy sledges and mapping out complex water transport routes along prehistoric rivers and coasts, researchers proved it is physically possible. So no, it didn't require magic. What it required was thousands of highly coordinated people, deep engineering intuition, and honestly, an unfathomable amount of raw determination to drag these monoliths across the English countryside. So the crucial point is that they didn't just drag these stones out there and prop them up. They engineered them. They actually used mortise and tenon joints. If you aren't familiar, that's a highly precise connection where a projecting pin, the tenon, fits exactly into a specially shaped hole, the mortise. What is absolutely mind-blowing about this is that this specific technique is usually reserved for fine woodworking, for making furniture or timber-framed houses. Yet these Neolithic visionaries took this highly precise interlocking technique and applied it to massive masonry. They literally pounded away at solid rock using smaller stones for thousands of hours just to carve out these precise joints so the stones would lock together seamlessly. It's just wild. Okay, so let's look at how this all builds into the final structure. Once those massive vertical pillars were locked firmly into the ground, the builders faced their ultimate challenge, perfecting the lintels. The lintels are those massive horizontal stones capping the top of the stone circle. Just picture the pure, staggering physical effort it took to hoist multi-ton stones high into the air. They likely used massive earth ramps or intricate timber scaffolding to pull it off. And once they were finally raised up there, they had to be perfectly placed so that those carved mortise and tenon joints locked together flawlessly. They even subtly curved the lintels to perfectly match the circumference of the circle. It's a true testament to this brilliant, ancient architectural precision that, frankly, still leaves modern engineers totally in awe. And this brilliantly illustrates a really key fact. Stonehenge did not exist in a vacuum. Thanks to sweeping aerial surveys and massive archaeological digs, we've actually uncovered nearby monuments, like the massive Darrington Walls. We've found hard evidence of sprawling ancient settlements that would have housed the thousands of workers who built the site. And we've even found significant human remains. So Stonehenge wasn't just this lonely, isolated structure sitting out in some empty field. The evidence proves that it was the focal point of a sprawling, active, and super vibrant prehistoric landscape. It was a bustling center of Neolithic life, intense ceremony, and perhaps even death. Which leads us right to the ultimate question, doesn't it? We've seen the absolutely incredible engineering, we've looked at the multi-century timeline, and we've explored the sprawling settlements that surrounded it. But if Stonehenge wasn't just a simple stone monument, what was its true purpose? Was it some sort of giant astronomical calendar, perfectly aligned with the golden sunrises and solstices? Was it a sacred burial ground reserved for elite families? Or could it have been an ancient site of healing, drawing pilgrims from hundreds of kilometers away just to be near those special blue stones? We have all this hard evidence of exactly how it was built, but the ultimate motive of those Neolithic people, that remains one of history's most tantalizing secrets.
Picture this, a foggy sunrise rolling across the English countryside, gradually revealing the ultimate archaeological cold case. Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're taking on what is arguably one of history's most iconic and honestly most persistent mysteries, Stonehenge. All right, let's dive right in.
I mean, just think about this for a second. We're talking about moving massive 25-ton rocks across vast stretches of land. And this was long before the invention of the wheel or any kind of modern machinery. Why go through that profound, literally backbreaking effort? What could possibly drive an ancient society to undertake such a nearly impossible task? That's the central mystery we're unpacking today.
To get to the bottom of this, here's our docket. We'll kick things off with the Stonehenge mystery itself, evaluate the main theories of its purpose, and look at some modern archaeological discoveries. Then, we'll debunk a few myths, take a peek at life in ancient Britain, and finally, deliver the final verdict.
Section 1. The Stonehenge Mystery. Let's look at this ancient puzzle. Moving to Section 2. Theories of its purpose. Time to evaluate our usual suspects.
If you're going to build something this massive, well, you need a pretty powerful motive, right? When we weigh the scientific consensus, a clear hierarchy of theories starts to emerge. First up, an astronomical observatory. This has a really high likelihood because the stones perfectly track the winter and summer solstices. Then we have a burial ground, which is actually confirmed. There is strong, undeniable evidence of human remains right there on the site. On the flip side, the idea of a healing center is heavily debated. That one is based mostly on the supposed acoustic or healing properties of the bluestones. We aren't taking sides here, of course, we're just looking at where the science currently points.
Now, when we compare the two heaviest hitting theories directly, a fascinating contrast emerges. On one hand, the solar calendar idea is supported by those incredibly precise solstice alignments. But the evidence against it? Well, there's a total lack of precise written records from the builders to confirm this was its actual primary use. On the other hand, we have the ceremonial gathering place. The evidence for this points to these vast landscape pathways built for massive crowds to approach the site. The catch? Seasonal limitations. It doesn't look like a year-round city, but more of a periodic, specialized destination.
So the crucial takeaway here is that regardless of whether it was a perfectly precise astronomical tool or a deeply religious temple, it was undeniably a powerful political symbol. It was a massive community monument. The collective effort required to build this thing didn't just happen by accident. It strongly suggests that Stonehenge served as a unifying anchor for an incredibly organized ancient society. Just a bold, massive statement of power and unity.
Section 3. Modern archaeological discoveries. Let's talk about some cutting-edge tech.
We are finally piercing through thousands of years of dirt and mystery using some real CSI-style tools. I'm talking about ground-penetrating radar and laser scanning. These are non-invasive technologies used to map hidden structures beneath the soil and capture the exact, millimeter-accurate details of the stones themselves. It's wild. These advanced tools allow archaeologists to visualize an entirely invisible ancient landscape. We're talking hidden pits, former stone locations, earthworks, and they can do all of this without having to lift a single trowel or disturb the sacred ground.
Another massive leap forward in our understanding comes from isotope DNA analysis. By studying genetic material extracted from ancient remains found at the site, scientists can actually determine the exact origins, migration patterns, and even family lineages of the builders. Think about that for a second. This isn't just guesswork anymore. This provides hard, undeniable scientific evidence about exactly who these people were, what they ate, and how far they traveled across Britain just to reach this site.
Section 4. Debunking popular Stonehenge myths. Time to clear up some false leads.
Before we can fully understand the truth, we really need to clear the board of some of those sensationalized rumors. Druid creators? Yeah. The monument was built millennia before Celtic Druids even existed in the region. Alien intervention or magical construction? We can swiftly dismiss those. What about lost advanced civilizations? There is a complete and total lack of current archaeological evidence supporting any of these ideas. Honestly, the real truth of sheer human ingenuity is far more impressive to me than any magical myth.
Section 5. Life in Ancient Britain. Let's look at this brilliant society.
To really grasp Stonehenge, we have to look past the stones themselves and look at the people who actually built it. 25. I just want to let that number sink in for a second. 25 tons. I want to emphasize this staggering number because it's the weight of just one of the larger sarsen stones. Just imagine moving that. No trucks, no cranes, no paved roads, nothing. Understanding this immense weight is absolutely vital for recognizing our ancestors' sheer ingenuity and physical determination.
We can break down the core capabilities of this incredibly capable society into 4 main pillars. First up, advanced engineering. They understood leverage, balance, and geometry to an astonishing degree. Second, complex organization. You don't feed and direct hundreds of workers without strict hierarchy and planning, right? Third, extensive trade routes. We actually know from excavations that materials were sourced from vast distances away. And fourth, deeply held beliefs. They had a spiritual or cultural drive strong enough to motivate generations of labor. This monument perfectly reflects a highly capable, highly structured world.
Section 6. The final verdict. Let's talk about the consensus we've reached.
So what's the definitive answer? While Stonehenge was a multi-purpose monument that evolved over millennia, it wasn't just built overnight for one single reason. Archaeologists today largely agree it started as a burial ground in its early days. Then it evolved into a massive solar calendar, and it always acted as a unifying ceremonial center. It's a great reminder that just like our modern institutions, ancient structures adapted and changed as the people who used them changed.
I absolutely love this quote because it hits the nail on the head regarding the scientific consensus. While the exact nuance of its purpose remains an evolving puzzle, we now possess clear evidence of the builders' immense capabilities and societal organization. We might not know the exact chants they sang or the specific daily rituals they performed, but thanks to modern science, the genius of their society is no longer a mystery.
Which leaves us with one final, thrilling question to ponder. What will the next generation of archaeological technology reveal beneath the stones? As laser scanning and DNA analysis get even sharper, the landscape of Stonehenge is bound to give up even more of its secrets. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and hey, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.